Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Caregiving Gen X Style. I am Steve Mullen.
And I'm Jennifer Mullen.
In this episode, we're talking about a phenomena that most caregivers will recognize immediately. The fact that no matter how much effort you put into taking care of your parent, emergencies will happen. The thing that you, as a caregiver, have to learn, however, is how to determine when you really need to get involved and fix things. But first, Jennifer, how's your mom?
Well, it's been an interesting few days with Gagi. A few days ago, she ended up in the emergency room with ultimately what turned out to be a pretty nasty case of COVID. We didn't know that when we went there. The interesting thing is that she used her Lifeline button.
Yes.
My brother and I were very happy about that. He had been over there a little bit earlier in the day. We knew she had a little bit of a cold and congestion, and he got her all squared away, and we thought everything was fine. And later that evening started getting all of the calls from ADT and, rushed over to her house, and the EMTs were there. And it was very evident from the moment I walked in the door that she was wiped out, not feeling well. She could barely lift her head up. It was really, sad to see her feeling so poorly. But got her to the ER, and then upon condition of my brother and I agreeing that, we wouldn't let her be alone for several days, they did not admit her to the hospital, which was good, right? We've talked about it before.
Yeah, if you're not sick when you go into the hospital, you'll be sick when you get out.
You'll be sick when they get out. And plus, they just do better when they're in their own space. And she definitely wanted to be in her own space. So my brother and I have been taking turns spending the night there. That's always an adventure. It's been, it's weird. It kind of feels weird to say this because she clearly hasn't been feeling well, but it's also been nice to spend a little bit of extra time with her. And in fact, I was thinking about it. I was just listening to the last episode that we had released on current events, and I had a few experiences with that while I've been staying with her. So number one, she still loves Lester. If you heard us talking about Lester,
yep,
we did.
Gotta watch Lester.
We watched Lester. It was awesome. Also watched the Today Show, which I never get to watch the Today Show.
I can't tell you the last time I watched that.
I'm not home. I'm not watching TV. So, whatever, that was fine. But I was thinking about it too. Like there were several times between watching the nightly news and then watching Today Show, which is at least a little news-like in the beginning, very early in the morning. But we had a few nice conversations about some things that were happening around the world.
Good.
And it was kind of nice to engage with her in that way while we were sitting there together watching the news. So, trying to find the bright side out of all of it. And the good news is she's doing much better now. In fact, I will say, after several nights of my brother and I alternating nights staying with her, toward the end of one afternoon with me, she said, I think I'd be okay, getting my apartment back to myself. So starting to get the hint. And then my brother came and relieved me, and he stayed. And then I got a text from him early the next morning. He's like, okay. He's like, I think mom's probably okay to be by herself. He's like, we're probably both driving each other a little crazy at this point, which means she's feeling better, and probably we don't need to be here 24/7 anymore. So that is how she's doing. But she is a trooper. It is the second time she's had COVID. She's had every vaccination that's possible out there for an elderly person with, she's immunocompromised, but whatever. She just was susceptible to it. But man, she fought right through it. She'll be stronger on the other side like she always is.
Yep, that's absolutely true.
Yep. So Steve, how's your mom?
Those of you who've been listening for a while, you may remember from last year around this time, we, mentioned that during the tail end of November and all of December and a little bit of January, our kids are home from college. And so we try to bank episodes before they get back, so we're not recording while they're here. So as a result, we haven't recorded an episode for a little bit here. So there's some updates. Last month, my mother was reevaluated at the assisted living. They do this once a year, and they were evaluating the level of care. And the way this works is, and I think this is most assisted livings do something like this, where they evaluate how much care they need, and you pay based on what level you're at. And when she went in there, she was put at a level 5, which is the highest level, which was really kind of fair.
Yeah.
It was fair because she was new to being in a wheelchair. She still was recovering from back surgery. She needed a lot of help. But since then, she's gotten better. She's figured out how to work things. She's gotten stronger. And
A lot stronger.
A lot stronger. And I had been pushing all last year. Can we get her reevaluated? Hey, can we get her reevaluated? I'm asking anybody that would listen to me, and they kept saying, well, sure. At the end of the year, we do that.
And if I can just squirrel for just a moment.
Squirrel.
I can't remember if we've talked about this before with like the contract that you've signed talks about levels, but it's not really very specific.
Oh, no. They're very vague about it.
It's very vague. It's not specific in terms of the type of care, nor is it specific about the cost associated with it.
So they do tell you level 1 costs this much, level 2 costs this much. Yes,
oh, okay.
But they don't tell you
wasn't even a cost.
They don't tell you what those are.
Right. Okay. That's
the thing they don't
what
tell
it
you.
is. Right. Okay.
And so it's very vague. And, it doesn't behoove them to lower anybody because you know what?
Right.
They're getting less money.
Of course.
But sure enough, my mother was reevaluated in December, and they lowered her from level 5 to level 4, which I think may be the first time in the history of ever that someone has had their cost of assisted living lowered.
Yeah.
So she's paying now $500 less per month.
Right.
Which is
awesome.
fantastic.
The sort of the benefit maybe of some of the turnover at the facility where she's been is there are some new folks who when you asked again, they didn't have the whole history of your mom for the 2 years
and
she's
it's
been
true.
there.
I mean, geez, the healthcare director, we're on our 4th one in 2 years.
Right.
So
it's probably looking at things at least a little more objectively with a different perspective.
Sure. And the way they do it is they talk to the CNAs that work with them most. And then they talk to the resident, and they try to get a picture of the whole day, and they put it into a database, and then each one of those things is assigned a point value. And then they add it up, and now I have an idea a little bit now of what the point values are. And she fell smack in the middle of level 4. So she's actually got a little room to slip if she needs to.
Yeah.
So that'll be good. So she's paying less. It's all great.
Yeah.
Everything's great.
And dipped a little different topic, but it was nice. Speaking of the facility that she's in, we recently had the chance to celebrate a family occasion.
So it was our
holiday
our family
there.
Christmas.
Yeah,
yes.
It was nice. We had a nice their activities room. We were allowed to use it,
which was
free of charge.
Which was
They didn't charge
wonderful
you for
because
that.
there were it's my side of the family. My brother has 3 daughters. 2 of them are married. 1 of them has a child. You're talking about 13 people here.
Yeah, it was great.
And if they had been crammed into her apartment, that would have been ridiculous.
Yeah. But I think it was nice for your mom to have us all there all together, kind of in her space.
I think she very much enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yep.
So before we get into the meat of the episode, I have a listener email to read.
What?
It's
That's
fantastic.
so exciting.
It's fantastic. This comes from Karen. I won't give her last name. Maybe she wouldn't want us to, but it's Karen. And she writes, just found this podcast excellent.
Excellent.
Karen, you are our new best friend. I, too, am a club sandwich primary caregiver. I like that because clearly she's been listening.
She has been listening.
She has a high schooler, a husband, 2 elderly parents, and a distant emotional sibling who also lives at a distance. So again, she's clearly been listening.
Yes.
Thanks so much for this info and entertaining podcast. You saved my sanity this week. Sincerely, Karen.
See?
Oh, she also wanted to say, I think I may have clipped this out when I was printing it out, but she also wanted to tell Jennifer that she is on board with the whole squirrel thing.
Oh,
She totally gets
how
that.
appropriate is that I just had a squirrel moment.
And she put a little animated picture there of, I think it was from the movie Up, where the dog would turn his head squirrel.
Thank you, Karen. See,
So,
we're on the same wavelength.
Karen's our new best friend.
Every now and then you just need a little squirrel. It happens.
Exactly.
They pop up.
So, it doesn't matter how settled you think things are. More stuff will always pop up for you to do for your loved one.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter if they're living independently with you. It doesn't matter if they're in a facility. It doesn't matter where they are. There's always more stuff for you, the caregiver, to do. Basically, our work is never done, and sometimes emergencies happen.
Well, basically what we're talking about in this episode is setting limits. That can be a little bit challenging for sure, especially early on, because I do feel like you kind of set a pattern at the beginning and then you find yourself suddenly at a point in time where maybe you need to think about
Perhaps I shouldn't have set that pattern.
Readjusting. But I would say, the first and most important thing to ensure that you have at least a little bit of a life outside of caregiving is to learn. We've talked about self-care before.
Yes.
Right? That's important. Also important is to recognize what really is an emergency and what's not. And I think there are a couple of things to consider here.
And first and foremost, your mother, when she pressed her button, that was absolutely an emergency.
Absolutely.
That is an example of an emergency.
Yeah, absolutely.
She couldn't lift her head up.
And in fact, by the way, another squirrel moment. Let me just say this about that. You know, my brother and I all the time are like, please also keep your phone with you at all times, like in the pocket of your robe. She had not done that in this instance. And I actually think that was a really good thing because I feel like she might have just been tempted to call me and say, I've walked into the kitchen. I'm now so exhausted. I literally can't lift my head up. What do I do? Blah, blah, blah. And then I would have been left with trying to figure out, call my brother and the two of us trying to figure out.
Is this an emergency or not?
Is this an emergency? Do we take her to the hospital? What do we do? Whatever. So it was actually awesome that she pressed the button and really did feel like it was an emergency. And talking with her about it since then, as she's gotten a little, less foggy, first few days, very foggy, a little less foggy. She's like, some of that night has come back to her and she's like, yeah, I do think that was the right thing to do.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And we were like, absolutely. It was the right thing to do. That was definitely an emergency.
No doubt.
But sometimes
what is an
there's not
emergency
actual
to
emergencies.
your loved one may not be an actual emergency.
Sometimes not.
In many cases, the lives of elderly people, they're small. And I know that sounds bad, but they are small. They don't have a lot going on. And it's filled, their days are filled with a lot of time to think.
Yes.
And that combination of those two things can lead to people sometimes building up a small problem into a giant one that they feel like must be dealt with immediately. Kind of the whole molehill into a mountain, mountain into a molehill, whatever it is.
Molehill and moles are smaller than mountains.
This is true.
Molehill into a mountain.
So the trick is to identify the small problems and diffuse the situation by explaining that it is something you're concerned about as well. But, maybe we don't have to deal with it right this second.
Yeah. Although, one thing I will say this about that. Sometimes it's also, there. You have to discern this too. Sometimes it's easier to sort of stop what you're doing and quickly take care of it. If it's super simple, you can quickly take care of it.
If it's a 30-second thing, sure.
Right. Yeah.
Like that plant is in the wrong place.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. Well, the next thing I think that probably you have to consider is that sometimes your loved ones maybe can be a little manipulative. Mm-hmm. Now, we definitely are not talking about our moms here. And I'm not saying that tongue in cheek. Like we're not talking about our moms right here. But we know that some caregivers have learned that if they, the person they're caring for gets riled up, gets nervous, gets worried, that the caregiver will follow suit. And basically what they're looking for here is attention, right? They want everyone to get all whipped up with them.
Yep.
So once again, you really need to develop a sixth sense about what is important and what is attention seeking, because otherwise you will find yourself being manipulated like a marionette.
Yep. You will be a puppet.
Yep.
Now, we have an example of a period when my mother had a series of what she considered emergencies, and they were all in the same day. And we're going to go through these emergencies, quote unquote emergencies, one by one and talk about how we address them and how they should be addressed. Now, this started the day before Mother's Day 2022. My mother had been in assisted living for about 6 months at that point. And we were really, you and I, Jennifer, were really starting to feel like, ooh, we've got some independence.
Yeah.
This is fantastic. Things are settling down. But then the emergencies all started happening at the same time.
Yeah, I remember. So I think the first thing that happens, so Mother's Day, which means the weather was starting to get warmer.
Yes.
The air conditioning in her apartment broke.
Yes.
It broke. Is this an emergency?
Well, it could be.
It could be. We live in the mid-Atlantic, and around Mother's Day, it definitely can get a little bit hot. So I remember she called you. She was in quite the tizzy.
She was in a tizzy.
The thing that she pointed out, however, was that the facility, someone where she lives, had loaned her a portable air conditioner that was keeping her apartment comfortable.
Everything was fine. The air conditioner was broken, but there was an air conditioner in her apartment.
So she was not an elderly person who was sitting in sweltering 110 degree heat.
No.
Yeah.
So
was it an emergency?
No.
No.
No, it was not.
I don't think it was.
I did bring her a tower fan. I stole it from our daughter, actually, to ensure that her bedroom got some of that cool air because the unit was in her living room. But, beyond that, everything was fine. Her apartment was perfectly comfortable.
Yeah. Didn't need to do anything.
The next emergency was that the CNAs were supposedly, and I do mean supposedly, being grumpy with her.
Yeah. I think after you did a little probing on this one,
Yes.
this was discovered maybe to be a little tiny bit true.
Yes.
But again, not really that big of a deal. Certainly not an emergency.
And she was in a crappy mood. So,
Yeah.
that may have led to another.
Well, right. And I think in normal everyday life, even when you're not in assisted, people are grumpy sometimes.
Yes, it happens.
They just are. And
It happens.
you've got to figure out how to deal with it. So your mom wasn't in a great mood. Somebody who walked into her apartment at that moment wasn't in a great mood.
Correct.
Is this an emergency?
This is not
It is
an
not an
emergency.
emergency.
And so basically I talked to her. I said, well, I'm sorry they're being grumpy. I'm sure it'll be better tomorrow. And that was really all it deserved.
Yep.
That's really all it was needed to be done. there.
Yep.
So the next emergency, quote unquote emergency, was that the next morning there was a special Mother's Day breakfast
Okay,
at
is
her
this the
assisted
same
living.
year though? Because is this
Yes.
the AC broke and then it was Mother's Day?
Yes.
All right. So
Yes.
I'm just going to say the factors are you put those things together anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, this may not sound like an emergency. I mean, a special Mother's Day breakfast or brunch or whatever it was. But as we have noted, she was in a tizzy.
Yeah.
So initially she told me, the first thing she said, I'm worried about being all hot and sweaty or looking all hot and sweaty because of the air conditioner.
But it wasn't hot in her
It wasn't hot
apartment
in her
because she had
apartment.
the portable AC.
So that just got basically thrown out the window. Then she said she didn't know what she'd wear to the breakfast because all of her nice clothes had been donated by us when we moved her into assisted living. So
Yeah,
this is a
that-
bit of a swipe at us.
Well, I remember that was a really tough one to hear. So for those of you who have been listening to all of our episodes, or even if you happen to catch, the couple of episodes where we talked about the
Go back to the nightmare of cleaning out.
nightmare of cleaning out. We didn't take that task lightly of cleaning out your mom's house. And what we could have done was packed up a few outfits for her, sent them to the assisted living, and then just donated everything else. Again, for anyone who listened to those episodes, I went to your mom's house. I packed everything up suitcase by suitcase that got, for days on end, got taken over to your mom when she was in the skilled nursing facility when we knew
Yes.
she was moving somewhere else, so that she could go through everything and make her own decisions about what to keep and what not to
Any
keep.
question we had about something that fit her.
We didn't throw
it
a
was-
single thing
it
away
was
that
put in
she didn't
front
give
of
us
her.
permission to throw away.
Exactly.
But yeah, so
So, and we also knew no one, and I do mean no one, would be more dressy than usual for this breakfast. I mean, think about what people wear in an assisted living. If you haven't been to one, I mean, really, they're dressed like normal old people. I mean, and they're not all dressy. Some are more dressy than others.
yes, and your mom has always taken great care with her
Yes.
appearance.
She's always put together.
matching necklace and earrings
And pins and everything
yes,
else.
yeah.
Yes.
So
So we got to the root of this issue. It took a little while. We got to the root of this issue. Basically, she didn't have her new shoes. She had ordered a new pair of nice sneakers, and I think I actually helped her order them. They were off of Amazon, and they had not arrived yet. And she was upset about this because she wanted her new shoes. And she wanted them wear them to breakfast. And so at that point, most of the stuff nowadays, if I order for her, I have it delivered to the assisted living and she just gets it. At that point, we hadn't figured out the system yet.
we
Things
didn't
were
really-
still coming here.
Yeah.
And I knew, the plan was just I would take them over next time I went over. As soon as they were delivered, I'd take them on over. Well, they hadn't been delivered to our house yet. But when I got home, they had been delivered.
Of course they were
Of course
here.
they were here. So basically, this is the last thing here. And this is when I finally decided to do something to diffuse an emergency, a quote unquote emergency. And I just made a second trip over there to the assisted living that day and surprised her with the shoes. I walked in, she was at dinner in the dining room, and I just walked in with the shoes, and she was very, very happy.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of settled things down a little bit, and that broke the chain of emergencies, and everything was fine. And and that's just basically trying to do something nice for somebody.
Right.
And cheered her up, and maybe, like I said, hopefully got her out of this funk that led to a million emergencies.
Yeah. And again, remembering, right, things that seem very important to them. We sometimes have to, change our perspective a little bit about what's important to them, which then turns into it seeming like an emergency, something critical that needs to be taken care of right away, you did exactly the right thing. I remember that day. I remember because you're like, oh my gosh, do I really want to get in the car and go back over there? Not that it's that far away,
It's not,
thankfully, but it was the right thing to do. And
it made her happy. And I
was
remember,
Mother's Day.
yes, it was Mother's Day. And I remember the next time I saw her, she was just very happy to have her new sneakers.
Yes.
And one thing you may have learned about my mother by now is she is a clothes horse. And
yes, she is.
She loves new clothes. And
they are still being ordered.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Every time I do her laundry, it's like there's something I've never seen before in there.
I mean, because I help every now and then, and I definitely have noticed a few new items.
Yep. Yeah. It's the catalogs. So she doesn't have a computer. Huh. She doesn't have a smartphone. She can't order online, but she gets about 5 catalogs a day.
Yep. She can pick up the phone and call that 800 number.
Yep. She knows what to do.
And she does.
And all of them send her catalogs because they know she's an easy mark.
Yes.
She will order. So essentially what we're saying with all these stories, no matter how good you are at caregiving, you're really just building a house of cards, and it will take one little gust of wind, and you're going to go back into crisis mode. But you have to determine the extent of that crisis and whether it's really an emergency or not. Otherwise, you're going to spend your whole day chasing emergencies.
Yes.
So that's the end of our episode. It's a bit of a short one, but I think we got our point across on this one. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks to Karen. By the way,
Karen,
for sending this wonderful email,
especially for appreciating my squirrels.
We love you so much, Karen. And thanks to everyone for listening. I know we got a new review on Apple recently. We probably will read that in the future. I just didn't get a chance to pull it up. And anyone who sends us an email, we'll probably read it on the show. And if you have any questions for us, certainly send us an email, send us a voicemail.
Yeah, can I say something as I'm sitting here?
No, you may not.
Welcome to my world, people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she has a microphone too. She gets to talk.
I just want to say, when we have gotten feedback from people, and I've had a couple of people at work recently too, who have made a point to talk to me about the podcast, and they listen to it, and
our next door neighbor.
Yeah, and they're in certain situations, etc. This started out. We started doing this. It was cathartic for us.
Yes.
Plus, whatever, we're nerds and we have fun putting microphones in front of our faces and sitting across the dining room table and talking to each other.
Yes. And by the way, I'd like to describe the dining room table right now.
Oh, you should totally do that.
And I will be taking a picture and posting this to Facebook. We have on this table right now, of course, our recording equipment, but also an entire 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle.
Yes. It was a Christmas gift. Thank you,
from
Stephen.
Me. Yes.
Thank you, Stephen.
And Jennifer's actually having a lot of trouble with this one, which is making me happy.
It is challenging.
She really usually just plows through this thing. The kids help sometimes. I help sometimes. But she is struggling, and it's kind of making me happy. But it's also, it's on the table for a long time now.
Yeah.
It's been a couple of weeks.
Well, it's also a little creepy, by the way. So it's a puzzle that's filled with cat faces. So I have a dozen sets of cat eyeballs staring at me. It's freaking me out a little bit while we're doing this.
And speaking of cat, we have 3 cats in the house right now. Mm-hmm. Our 2 normal cats plus our daughter's cat, because she's hasn't gone back to school yet, and they're all in the house right now. Normally we have an indoor-outdoor cat. Normally when we're recording, she's out in the garage in her little bed out there. I'm shocked we haven't had a cat fight here.
I can't believe it, although I did take a picture of her sitting on your lap.
Yes, which
as we got started.
Post.
I think we should post that. Everyone wants to see Smidge.
I don't know that anybody wants to see what I look like.
Well, okay, so we'll crop you out of it. Okay.
We'll blur my face out, put a smiley face in the way.
Yeah.
Anyway, so if you want to get in touch with us, you can email us, caregivinggenxstyle@gmail.com. You can send us a text or a voicemail at this number, 804-723-1221. And you can also contact us on Twitter. The handle is @GenXCaregiving. We're on Facebook. Just search for the name of the podcast and you will find it. And just contact us those ways. And like I said, we may read it on our podcast.
Yep.
Thanks to everyone for listening. Have a great day.
Good night, everyone.